They called me a failure. Those words echo in my head even now, long after everything has changed. But back then, on that cold Tuesday morning when I first strapped the red insulated bag to the back of my rusty bicycle, those words felt like they had been carved into my chest with a dull knife. I was 60 years old. 60. An age when most men are thinking about retirement, about golf courses, about finally relaxing and watching their grandchildren grow up. But me? I was zipping up a cheap polyester uniform and checking my phone for the next delivery request. My name is Frank, and this is the story of how my family laughed at me, how my own grandchildren refused to be seen in public with me, and how one rainy night changed absolutely everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of my delivery job, but the beginning of the end of my old life. I had been a businessman for 35 years. Owned a mid-sized logistics company, nothing too fancy, but enough to put food on the table, enough to send my 2 kids to college, enough to buy a modest house in a decent neighborhood. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. I was respected. When I walked into a room, people nodded at me. My opinion mattered. Then the recession hit. Then my business partner, a man I had trusted like a brother, decided to cash out in the worst possible way. Then the lawsuits came. Then the bank took the house. By the time I turned 59, I had lost everything except my pride. And let me tell you something about pride at that age: it doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't buy groceries. It doesn't stop your daughter from looking at you like you're a ghost of the man you used to be. My wife had left 2 years before the collapse. She said she couldn't handle the stress, but I think she just couldn't handle watching me shrink. She remarried quickly, some retired dentist with perfect teeth and a boat. I didn't blame her. Honestly, I didn't have the energy to blame anyone anymore. So there I was, 60 years old, living in a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The constant thrum of washing machines became my lullaby. The smell of cheap detergent became my cologne. And the loneliness? That became my only consistent companion. I had 2 children, a son named Michael and a daughter named Sarah. Both in their 30s, both with families of their own, both with that particular kind of disappointment that only a fallen father can inspire. Michael was the worst. He had become successful in real estate, and success had made him forget where he came from. He drove a black SUV that cost more than my annual rent. He wore suits that probably cost more than my first car. And every time he looked at me, I could see him calculating how much I was going to cost him in the end. Sarah was gentler, but only on the surface. She would call me every few weeks, ask how I was doing in that voice people use when they're not sure they want the answer. She'd invite me to family dinners sometimes, but I could feel the tension in the room, the way her husband would check his watch every few minutes, the way the conversation would die whenever I spoke. But the grandchildren? Oh, that hurt more than anything. Michael had 2 kids, a boy named Ethan who was 14, and a girl named Chloe who was 12. I had watched them take their first steps. I had taught Ethan how to ride a bike. I had braided Chloe's hair when she was little and insisted on looking like a princess. I loved those kids more than I had ever loved anything in my life. And they were embarrassed to be seen with me. Started small. Chloe would pull away when I tried to hug her. Ethan would pretend to be on his phone whenever I walked into the room. Then it got worse. Michael told me flat out that the kids didn't want to visit anymore. Said it made them uncomfortable to see me like this. Like what? I asked. Like someone who's struggling? Like someone who's trying to survive? He didn't answer. He just gave me that look. That look that said, "You had your chance, Dad. You blew it. Now deal with the consequences." So I dealt with them. Alone. I tried to find work, of course. I sent out resumes, hundreds of them. But who wants to hire a 60-year-old man with a failed business and a broken spirit? The interviews I did get were humiliating. Young managers in open offices asking me where I saw myself in 5 years. 5 years? I just wanted to see myself eating dinner next week. After 8 months of rejections, I did the only thing I could do. I signed up for a food delivery app. It didn't require an interview. It didn't require me to explain my past. It just required a bike, a phone, and a willingness to swallow whatever pride I had left. The first day was brutal. My legs screamed after the first hour. My back ached. My phone kept buzzing with orders, and I kept getting lost because I wasn't used to navigating by GPS. I made $37 in 9 hours. $37. That was less than minimum wage. But it was something. It was money I had earned with my own 2 hands, my own 2 legs, my own stubborn refusal to give up. I didn't tell my family at first. I knew how they would react. I had seen the way Michael looked at delivery drivers when they showed up at his house. Like they were invisible. Like they were less than human. But secrets have a way of coming out, don't they? It happened on a Sunday. Sarah had invited me to a barbecue at her house, and I had made the mistake of showing up in my delivery uniform because I had come straight from a shift. I didn't think it would be a big deal. It was just clothes. Just a red polyester shirt and black pants. But the moment I walked into that backyard, everything stopped. Michael was there with his family. Sarah's husband Greg was manning the grill. Some neighbors I didn't recognize were holding drinks and staring at me like I had just crawled out of a sewer. "Dad, what are you wearing?" Sarah asked. Her voice was sharp, panicked. I looked down at myself. My work clothes. I came straight from a shift. "You're working," Michael said. He was smirking. Actually smirking. "Doing what?" "Cleaning toilets. Delivering food," I said quietly. "I'm a delivery driver." The silence that followed was deafening. And then the laughter started. Not polite laughter. Not the kind of laughter that tries to hide itself. No, this was open, mocking, gut-wrenching laughter. Michael doubled over. Greg nearly dropped his spatula. Even Sarah, my own daughter, covered her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking. "You're delivering food?" Michael gasped between laughs. "At 60 years old? Dad, that's actually hilarious. How much do you make?" $5 an hour. "More than zero," I said, but my voice was weak. Ethan and Chloe were standing by the pool. They weren't laughing. They were just staring at me with this horrible expression. Shame. Pure, unfiltered shame. Like I had done something disgusting. Like I had shown up to their school naked. Chloe whispered something to Ethan. He nodded. Then they both turned and walked inside the house. That moment broke something in me. Not my spirit, not my will to keep going. But something deeper. Something that had been holding onto the hope that my family still saw me as a person. That hope died right there in Sarah's backyard, surrounded by the laughter of the people I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for. I left without eating. I got back on my bike and did 3 more deliveries that night. And with each drop-off, each door that opened to a surprised face, each tip that felt more like charity than payment, I made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't ask them for anything ever again. Not for money. Not for respect. Not for love. I would do this job and I would survive, and I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. The months that followed were hard. Colder than I ever expected. My family basically cut me off after that barbecue. Sarah's calls became once a month, then once every 2 months, then nothing. Michael stopped returning my texts altogether. The grandchildren, well, I didn't exist to them anymore. I saw pictures on Facebook sometimes. Birthday parties, vacations, holidays, all without me. The delivery job became my whole world. I learned the city streets like the back of my hand. I learned which restaurants were fast and which ones would make you wait 20 minutes for an order. I learned which neighborhoods tipped well and which ones treated you like dirt. I learned to read the weather, to avoid the worst of the rain and the heat, to push through when my body screamed at me to stop. I became good at it. Fast. Reliable. The app gave me a 5-star rating, and regular customers would request me specifically. Old Frank, they called me. The guy who always shows up with a smile, even when it's pouring rain. And it was raining on that night. The night everything changed. I remember it perfectly. The rain wasn't just falling. It was attacking. Huge, angry drops that seemed to come from every direction at once. My raincoat had stopped being waterproof about 200 deliveries ago. My shoes were soaked through. My fingers were numb inside my gloves. But I had 3 more deliveries to complete, and I needed the money. Rent was due in 4 days. The laundromat below my apartment had raised their rates again. and I hadn't eaten anything that day except a granola bar I found at the bottom of my bag. The first 2 deliveries went fine. Nothing special. A family in the suburbs who tipped $3. A college kid who tipped nothing and looked annoyed that I had gotten his order wrong even though I had handed him exactly what the receipt said. Then came the 3rd delivery. I looked at my phone, wiping rain off the screen with my sleeve. The address was in the wealthiest part of the city, a neighborhood I rarely delivered to because the gates and security codes were a nightmare. But the pay was good, almost $20 including tip, and I couldn't afford to be picky. The house was a mansion. I don't use that word lightly. This wasn't just a big house. This was the kind of house that has its own name, its own gate, its own security booth with an actual guard who looked at me like I was delivering a bomb instead of Thai food. Name? The guard asked through a small window. Frank. Delivery for. Actually, the name isn't listed. Just says the Johnson residence. The guard made a phone call, spoke quietly, then nodded at me. Go straight up the driveway. Ring the doorbell twice. Wait on the mat. I cycled up the longest driveway I had ever seen. Immaculate landscaping on both sides. Fountains. Statues. A garage that could fit 10 cars. My bike looked so out of place that I almost laughed. Almost. The rain was coming down even harder now. I pulled the food bag close to my chest, protecting it like a mother protecting a child. If this order got ruined, I wouldn't just lose the $20. I'd probably get banned from the app. And then I'd have nothing. I walked up the marble steps to the front door. My wet shoes squeaked on the expensive stone. I rang the doorbell once, twice, just like the guard said. Then I stepped back and waited, shivering, water dripping from every part of my body. A minute passed, then 2. I was about to ring again when I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone important. Someone who wasn't used to waiting for anything. The door opened. The man standing there was in his early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my entire month's income. His hair was perfect even though it was raining outside. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, the kind of eyes that assessed everything and everyone. He looked at the food bag, then at my uniform, then at my face, and his expression changed. The confidence drained out of him like water from a broken dam. His mouth fell open. His eyes widened. His hands, which had been reaching for the food, dropped to his sides. His face turned pale, then whiter than I had ever seen a human being turn. "Oh my God," he whispered. I blinked. "Sir, your order is here. I have a pad thai and—" "No," he said, cutting me off. His voice was shaking. His whole body was shaking. "No, no, no. It can't be." I felt a spike of anxiety. Had I messed up the order? Delivered to the wrong house? I checked the address on my phone again. This was the place. "Sir, if there's a problem with the order, you can contact customer support and—" "You don't recognize me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief. "You really don't recognize me?" I looked at his face more closely. There was something familiar about it, something in the shape of his jaw, the curve of his brow. But I couldn't place it. I met thousands of people through deliveries. They all blurred together after a while. "I'm sorry, sir. I deliver to a lot of houses. You'll have to—" 20 years ago, he said, his voice cracking. 20 years ago on the old highway. The bridge. The one that collapsed during the storm. Time stopped. The rain was still falling. The wind was still howling. But in my mind, everything went silent. Because I remembered. I remembered that night like it was burned into my soul. 20 years ago, before the business failed, before the divorce, before everything fell apart. I was driving home from a late meeting, and the storm was terrible. Worse than this one. The old bridge, the one they had been warning about for years, finally gave way. A section of it collapsed into the river below. I was on the other side. I saw it happen. I saw cars plunging into the dark water. I heard screams that I can still hear sometimes when I can't sleep. I didn't think. I just acted. I pulled over, ran to the edge of the broken bridge, and climbed down the twisted metal supports. I found a car hanging halfway over the edge. A young man inside, unconscious, his seatbelt jammed. I got him out. I pulled him up the embankment with strength I didn't know I had. I carried him to safety just as the rest of the bridge collapsed. The paramedics took him away before I could even get his name. The police took my statement. The news reporters wanted to interview me, but I refused. I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who did what anyone would have done. I never saw that young man again. I never knew if he survived, if he recovered, if he even remembered what happened. Until now. Timothy, I said. The name came back to me from the police report. Timothy something. You were 22 years old. You had just graduated from college. He was crying now. This powerful, wealthy man in his cashmere sweater was crying like a child. Tears streaming down his face, mixing with the rain. Timothy, right, he said. And you never came to the hospital. You never answered the phone when they tried to contact you. I spent years looking for you. Years. The police said you didn't want to be found. I thought maybe you had died. I shook my head. I just went back to my life. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need... Need? He almost shouted. Need? You saved my life. My entire life. I have 3 children because of you. I have a company because of you. I have everything because you pulled me out of that car 30 seconds before it went into the river. He grabbed my shoulders. His hands were strong, trembling, desperate. What are you doing out here? He asked. In this rain? Delivering food? Why? The question hit me harder than I expected. Why? Because I had no other choice. Because my family had abandoned me. Because I was too proud to ask for help and too broke to afford anything else. I tried to explain. The words came out in fragments, broken pieces of a broken life. The failed business. The divorce. The family who laughed at me. The grandchildren who wouldn't look at me. The studio apartment above the laundromat. The granola bars for dinner. Timothy listened without interrupting. His expression changed from shock to disbelief to horror to something I couldn't quite name. When I finished, he didn't speak for a long time. He just stood there in the doorway, rain soaking his expensive clothes, staring at me like I was a ghost. Come inside, he finally said. Sir, I have other deliveries. Forget the other deliveries. Come inside right now. I hesitated. I wasn't used to being invited into mansions. I wasn't used to being looked at like I mattered. But something in his voice, something raw and desperate and grateful, made me step through that door. The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. Marble floors, chandeliers, art on the walls that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. But I barely noticed any of it because Timothy was leading me to a living room where a fire was burning in a massive fireplace, and he was pushing me into a chair, and he was taking the food bag from my hands, and he was calling for his wife. Margaret, come here. Right now. A woman appeared from another room. She was beautiful, elegant, with kind eyes that widened when she saw me sitting there in my soaked uniform, dripping water onto her Persian rug. Timothy, what's going on? Who is this? This is him, Timothy said. His voice was still shaking. This is the man from the bridge, the one who saved my life. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! And then, to my complete shock, she started crying too. The next hour was a blur. Margaret brought me towels and dry clothes that belonged to Timothy but fit me well enough. She made me hot tea and sandwiches, more food than I had eaten in a week. She sat across from me with tears still on her cheeks while Timothy paced back and forth, telling his children, who had come downstairs to see what all the commotion was about, who I was and what I had done. Their kids were teenagers, 2 boys and a girl. They looked at me with wide eyes, like I was a character from a movie. Their father had told them about the bridge accident many times. He had shown them the news clippings. He had made them understand that without a stranger's bravery, none of them would exist. And now that stranger was sitting in their living room, wearing their father's sweatpants, eating their mother's sandwiches. I don't understand something, Timothy said finally, stopping his pacing to stand in front of me. Your family, your children and grandchildren, they laughed at you? For delivering food. I nodded, not trusting my voice. And you saved my life, he continued. You're a hero. You're the bravest man I've ever known. And they laughed at you? People forget, I said quietly. Or maybe they never knew. I never told them about the bridge. It never seemed important. Timothy looked at his wife. She looked at him. Something passed between them. Some silent conversation that I wasn't privy to. Frank, Timothy said slowly, what if I told you that I could help you? What if I told you that I've been looking for you for 2 decades because I wanted to give you something? Something that would change your life the way you changed mine. I didn't know what to say. Help? From a stranger I had saved 20 years ago? Felt wrong somehow. Like accepting payment for doing the right thing. I didn't save you for a reward, I said. I know, Timothy replied. That's exactly why you deserve one. The next morning, I woke up in a guest bedroom that was bigger than my entire apartment. Sunlight was streaming through windows that overlooked a garden with actual peacocks walking around. I had slept better than I had in years, and for a few blissful moments, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. I sat up, confused, wondering if it had all been a dream. But no. There was a tray on the nightstand with fresh coffee and orange juice and a note in elegant handwriting. Stay for breakfast. We have so much to talk about. Timothy, I stayed for breakfast. And lunch. And dinner. Timothy didn't want to let me go. He told me about his life, his company, his fortune. He had started a tech firm a few years after the accident, driven by a new appreciation for life that the bridge collapse had given him. The company had exploded, gone public, made him richer than he had ever imagined. None of this exists without you, he kept saying. None of it. I tried to deflect, to minimize, to tell him that anyone would have done what I did. But he wouldn't hear it. No, he said firmly. Not anyone. You climbed down a collapsed bridge in the middle of a storm. You pulled me out of a car that was hanging over a river. You carried me up an embankment with broken glass cutting your hands and water rising around your feet. Not anyone. You. I looked down at my hands. The scars from that night were still there, faded but visible. I had forgotten about them, or maybe I had chosen to forget. What do you want? Timothy asked me. Not what do you need? Not what can I give you? What do you want? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I wanted my dignity back. I wanted to walk into a room without people looking at me with pity or disgust. I wanted to provide for myself without shame. I wanted my grandchildren to look at me with pride instead of embarrassment. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, I want to work, real work, with meaning. Timothy smiled. I can do that. And he did. He offered me a job at his company. Not a charity position, not a made-up title to make me feel important. A real job with real responsibilities. He had a logistics division, and I had 35 years of logistics experience. It was a perfect fit. Within a week, I had traded my red polyester uniform for a desk with my name on it. Within a month, I had moved out of the laundromat apartment into a small but comfortable condo that Timothy helped me find. Within 3 months, I was managing a team of 20 people and remembering what it felt like to be respected. But the best part? The part that still makes me emotional when I think about it? Timothy didn't stop there. He wanted to do more. He wanted to make sure that the people who had laughed at me, who had abandoned me, who had made me feel worthless, understood exactly who I was. My family, of course, found out eventually. Michael saw me on the news. There was a charity event that Timothy had organized in my honor, an event celebrating local heroes, and the news stations covered it. There I was, 60 years old, standing next to a tech billionaire, accepting an award for bravery that had happened 2 decades ago. Michael called me the next day. I could hear the confusion in his voice, the desperation, the sudden realization that he might have made a terrible mistake. Dad, I saw you on TV. What's going on? How do you know Timothy, right? He's the man I saved from a collapsed bridge 20 years ago, I said calmly. He's been looking for me ever since. He found me when I delivered food to his house in the rain. Silence. Then, you never told us about that. You never asked. You were too busy laughing at me. More silence. I could hear him breathing, hear him trying to find the right words, the words that would make everything okay. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought. We all thought. I know what you thought, Michael. You thought I was a failure. You thought I had nothing left to offer. You taught your children to be ashamed of me. That's not fair. You never told us. Fair. I interrupted. Was it fair when you laughed at me in your sister's backyard? Was it fair when you told your kids not to visit me? Was it fair when you stopped returning my calls? He didn't have an answer. He couldn't. Because there was no answer that would make any of it right. I didn't cut him off. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't humiliate him the way he had humiliated me. But I also didn't pretend that everything was fine. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding what kind of person you want to be. I wanted to be the kind of person who saves someone from a collapsed bridge. Not the kind of person who holds grudges until they rot. So I gave Michael another chance. A careful, cautious chance. We had dinner together, just the two of us, and we talked for hours. He apologized. Really apologized. With tears and shame and genuine regret. He admitted that he had been cruel, that he had let success go to his head, that he had forgotten who he was because he was so afraid of becoming who I had become. I didn't want to end up like you, he confessed. Broke, alone, delivering food. And I was so scared of that future that I pushed you away before I could catch your failure like a disease. That honesty hurt, but it also healed something. Because for the first time, Michael wasn't pretending. He wasn't smirking or laughing or looking at me like I was invisible. He was just my son, scared and flawed and finally willing to admit it. Sarah came around too, slower and more awkwardly. She brought her kids to my new condo, introduced me to them again like I was a stranger. Ethan and Chloe were older now, teenagers who understood more than they had a few years ago. They looked uncomfortable, guilty, unsure of what to say. I didn't make them say anything. I just showed them my life. The job, the condo, the friends I had made at work, the respect I had earned. I showed them that success isn't about money or houses or titles. It's about waking up every day and choosing to be brave, even when the world has given you every reason to give up. Do you hate us? Chloe asked me quietly, when her parents weren't listening. I thought about it. Hate was such a strong word, such a heavy word. I had carried enough heavy things in my life. No, I said. I don't hate you. I love you. I've always loved you. Even when you wouldn't look at me. Even when you walked away. Love doesn't stop just because someone hurts you. She cried. I held her. And for the first time in years, I felt like a grandfather again. Timothy and I became close. Closer than I had ever been with my own children, if I'm being honest. He introduced me to his friends, his colleagues, his world. He treated me like family, like the father he had lost when he was young. We had dinner together every week. He called me just to talk. He asked for my advice on business and life and everything in between. You know, he said one evening, you could have been angry. After everything your family did to you, you could have been bitter. You could have used me to destroy them. I shook my head. What would that have accomplished? More pain? More distance? I've had enough of both. Timothy raised his glass. To Frank, the bravest man I know. Not because he climbed a collapsed bridge in a storm, but because he chose kindness when he had every right to choose revenge. I clinked my glass against his, and for the first time in a very long time I smiled. Not a forced smile, not a polite smile, but a real one. The kind of smile that starts in your chest and works its way up until your whole face feels warm. Looking back now, I realized that the food delivery job wasn't the lowest point of my life. It was the turning point. It was the thing that broke me open so I could be rebuilt. It taught me humility, yes, but it also taught me that dignity isn't something other people give you. It's something you carry inside yourself, no matter what uniform you're wearing or what address you live at. And my family, they learned something too. They learned that success is temporary, that failure doesn't define you, and that the people who love you deserve better than laughter and turned backs. Michael started volunteering at a homeless shelter after our conversation. Sarah started calling me every week again. The grandchildren, well, they came around slowly. But they came. As for me, I'm still working at Timothy's company. I'm 63 now, and I have no plans to retire. I wake up every morning grateful for another day, another chance to prove that it's never too late to start over. The rain still falls sometimes. The storms still come. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. Because I know something now that I didn't know back then. Something that all the money in the world couldn't buy and all the success couldn't teach. The people who matter don't mind if you deliver food at 60. And the people who mind don't matter. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you saved 20 years ago shows up at the perfect moment to save you right back.